Why hello and welcome back to another episode of Voice of the Rings. I'm your host and guide, Zollin Ironshield, and we're on a RiseToWar Legacy today, my friends. And I would like to go over a real quick list for new players on the Dwarf Commanders. As you know, if you watch my channel, I really do like the Dwarves. And I just did a live stream recently, and I had someone say that they'd like a little bit more detail on an overlay of the Dwarves, kind of generalize of all the different commanders and what they're really good at, okay? So I do kind of use all the Dwarf Commanders. Ori, I use mainly for certain other objectives, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I will do some more breakdown videos. I do on the channel already on this playlist have a guide video with my friend Jethros we made for DAIN and GIMLI, and we will probably do others of the dwarfs. Those are more deep dive breakdowns of every character. This will be a real quick video overlaying, just kind of going over the commander. So let's just go straight into it. And of course, if you do, Zollin wants me to remind you, if you do enjoy the video, please do like and subscribe. It's great, and I appreciate the support. All right, let's go straight into it. So right now I am Rohan. Unfortunately, early in the game when you're playing the faction of Rohan, you are not allowed to get dwarf units until way later in the building tree. That is a side thing if you want to go watch my building video to help you with that understanding. But we're going to focus mainly on what do they excel at, the different Dwarven commanders, okay? So we'll go ahead and start with the lower tier commanders. So there are several Dwarven commanders, so let's go into the respect thing real quick. Just go over it real fast, real little overview here. So we have the tier 1 commanders, right? We have Ori and we have DWALIN, all right? Both very good commanders, and I will talk about them in a moment. Then we have the tier 2 commanders. We have the made-up character for RiseToWar, but I think he's super cool, FALGIN. And we have BALIN, who is also a very good. Again, they are very good in their niche, and I will talk about it. And GIMLI, which is my main character that I play. And then we have our tier 3 commanders, THORIN and DAIN. All right, so but let's go ahead and just start by going from the bottom up. All right, so let's talk about Ori. All right, this is the one I probably use the least. All right, but Ori is a balanced character. Again, if you don't know about what balanced warrior, all this stuff, I do have a video on that you can watch separately. But he's a very balanced character, but he is very focus heavy based. So if we go into his tree, because this is what is important. Okay, let's say you have Ori and you just have him respect 1, all right? So Ori is very good. He has the musician tree and this cleric one, right? Which he also is good at doing tips because of these two. But just so you know, if you're using him for tips, great, put points into that. If not, I use him personally. Ori, I find, is one of the best heroes in the game for fighting Balrogs or dragons, all right? And before you bounce, he's also, DWALIN is also extremely good at fighting Balrogs and dragons. But the thing is, the musician tree stacks with based focus abilities. Okay, so again, if you are a new player and you're trying to follow along, right, focus and right, the might, right, right, the different two things stacked, physical damage, right, that stack in the game. So Ori is very good at it because you go put full points into musician tree, okay, and then you just toss a bunch more points into cleric. Now you really do need to have him respect 5, him or DWALIN, so you can max out Warrior of the Lonely Mountain and get this negative 50% fire damage for your army. That is huge. That's what really makes it work for doing those two particular tasks. But again, they're very good at other things. I've seen a lot of battle Oris that work very, very well by going Durin's Blood into Whirlwind and All-In, okay? So again, I will have a more in-depth guide of every commander, Ori, DWALIN, all these characters, but this is going to be a more generalized overview of what I think they're good at. So again, you could do tips with him, right? You can do dragons and Balrogs, especially if he's tier 5. He can do it the other way too, but what I end up doing is I put all my points in musician, warrior, and then I drop some points into cleric, okay? His special weapon, which I actually do have, because I don't know why I bought it, but I did. It is actually very, very good, even at level 1, for giving your dwarves 50% chance of causing maximum damage, which is super good, especially if you throw on the final level of axe throwers onto him, because axe throwers have a very wide discrepancy of damage levels, so it's random. They either hit real low or real high. This gives a better chance of them always hitting their max damage, which again, what you can do with him or DWALIN is you can just drop on a ton of axe throwers. You don't need any frontline, just a bunch of axe throwers, because all the dwarf units have a natural 20% fire resistance anyway, right? As we all know. Excuse me, not all the dwarf. That's the guardians and yeah, and goats. But the axe throwers put it with him, he'll lose like 4 guys. Seriously, he'll lose only like 4 guys, and you'll deal hundreds of thousands of damage to the dragon or Balrog. So great for taking bosses in that way. Ori is overall a pretty decent tier 1 commander. He can also battle pretty well. He's fine at taking tiles because he has this ability to heal his troops. Now, there are better people at taking tiles in the group of dwarf commanders. I'm only going to talk about dwarf commanders, so don't, in question, you know, start in the comments. What about this commander? Gandalf the Grey is great. Yes, Gandalf the Grey is great at taking tiles. We all know that. We're talking about dwarves. DAIN, or excuse me, not DAIN. DWALIN is, again, a wonderful fighter, okay? So he has a special item if you get to rank 10. Again, this is for free-to-play players. You might not have a rank 10 unless you've been playing from the very beginning of the seasons. Then you might, at this point, have your twin axes or whatever if you're using DWALIN. It's a good ability. It got a nerf a couple months ago where it used to work on any damage. Now it's just his normal attacks, but it's still strong. He still buffs. Again, right now it's 0 because I don't have it fully trained, right? That's a different story. He's very powerful at dealing damage. He's a very good damage dealing commander. So not only can you toss on Warrior of the Lonely Mountain on him, you can also toss on, you know, all your Durin's Blood, all your Experienced Warrior, which are really the high damage trees of any of the dwarves. You could even throw this on early. What I like to do early in the game is I like to go ahead and just throw on the Musician, because those tile takings from, you know, level, you know, 1 power tiles up to 150 tiles, it really helps keep your troops alive, and that's the kind of the goal early in the game when you're running out of troops. Later, when you're doing PvP, you're gonna probably want to use Musician. You're probably gonna want to use all of Durin's Blood, and you're gonna want to be using Experienced Warrior, and possibly this for countering people that use Alchemists, especially the Witch King. Okay, so a very good counter to the Witch King is DWALIN or Ori, or any of the characters that have Warrior of the Lonely Mountain. But again, I still highly recommend that you also put on the armor that reduces fire damage by 60% when you have it maxed. That stacked with Warrior of the Lonely Mountain really helps you beat Witch Kings. But again, Witch Kings is one of the most powerful characters. We will have a video separate on that if you want to check it out on the playlist. All right, next dwarf. Let's talk about, go up to the tier 2s. Let's talk about DWALIN. Excuse me, BALIN. We just talked about DWALIN. BALIN, his brother. All right, BALIN is a very good tile-taking commander as well. You really, early, if you're not playing the dwarf faction, or you're not playing a game that you can get dwarves quickly, it's kind of hard to use him early, because Lord of the Glittering Claves is something that works with dwarves, all right? One ally has this, you know, healing ability, right? Chance of taking effect, recover some health. He also has Leader of Dwarves, right? Again, and Heavy Wound, where you can drop 1 point in to make sure the enemy NPC on the tile doesn't heal, right? But again, you go to dwarves, but he's still decent because he has Revitalize, okay? Revitalize is a big one, you guys. This ability is quite amazing for several reasons for tile taking, okay? Even for PvP, but really for tile taking. Revitalize is amazing because when you max it out, you can hit 2 targets instead of 1. It gives Rush, can activate this skill immediately after battle begins. You basically deal a bunch of damage to one enemy, and then you heal 1, or if you have it max 2 people to 100% of their HP, right? Which is really, really a good heal. And then Frightened. Frightened is fantastic for taking tiles. It's fantastic for PvP as well, but it is very, very good for taking tiles, because one thing you want to do when you're taking tiles in this game is you want to make sure you lose as little troops as possible. I cannot repeat that enough for you guys, for new players or for old players. Your goal is to lose as little troops as possible, because that is like your currency to be able to even play the game. Your troops to attack things, to take tiles, to do objectives. You need troops. So stunning the enemies, so less of your people are dying, because, you know, for the first 4 rounds, 2 enemies have this chance to be stunned. It goes up to a decent number up there, but the full percent, again, we're not doing details in their attacks. And Inspiration. You can put focus items on him, and it stacks with focus, and he basically, for the first 3 rounds, all his units do more damage. Another good way, well, they're stunned, to be doing more damage. So again, a great tree for taking tiles. He also has Durin's Blood, just like the other ones, and yes, he can do really decent damage. I do not have his special weapon, but it is rather quite powerful. Basically, BALIN and Dwarves units against Orcs and Dragons, damage dealt 5%. Now, yes, there are dragons in this game. They're very rarely used unless someone has a dragon pit or one of the neutral camps. So the nice one is orcs. All right. So if you're fighting a team, if you're fighting Mordor or Gundabad or anyone that's going to be using a lot of orcs, it'll help you against them. And so that is pretty strong, 5%, and that can go up, up, up. Again, if you're playing a role-playing server, that'll be even better, because if you're the dwarf faction, you're fighting the orc faction, they can't even use good units. So you'll most likely be fighting dwarves. If you're playing on a regular server that really anyone can have any kind of units, good or bad, being good side or bad side, it doesn't really help you quite as much if you end up fighting a bunch of other dwarves or elves or something, right, in that battle. So that's really up to you with what you want to do if you want to get his item. I will, at the end here, suggest what my favorite items are out of the dwarves, okay, at the very end of this video here. We are also going to now talk about the next tier 2 on this list is FALGIN. FALGIN, where did you go? I have not been using FALGIN yet this season quite yet. I probably will later on. He is a pretty decent commander. He needs dwarves. You have to use FALGIN. He's kind of locked in to use dwarves, all right? And real quick, the reason why that is, again, he was musician. If you notice, there's a trend going on. Durin's Blood, musician. It's in a lot of these characters, right? They bounce around. The experienced warrior, you'll see all of those trees, and then all of them usually have a more special tree, or warrior of the lonely mountain kind of thing. Erdluin Expedition, all right? Erdluin is the Blue Mountains where Thorin's Hall is, if you don't know from the books, little lore bit side there. I do like this made-up character because he seems like he fits in the world really well, so it's cool for the game. All allied units, physical damage received, this stacks up to, times 15. All for each dwarf ally type present, which means if you only have one group with them, it's only going to allow you to use one dwarf, right? If you're a new player, one of the buffs. So what you want to do is you want to times this by 3. So you really want to have 3 separate kinds of units. So, maybe axe throwers, goat riders, and guardians, or maybe depth defenders or something you want to throw in as one of the different ones. So again, good, gives him some speed. All right, good. And then of course he's got musician, which again is just really good buffs for your army and heals for your army. Durin's Blood is pretty good too. He can do damage himself, just like the other trees. They're just Whirlwind and All-In are high damage physical skills, right? They use a lot of physical damage instead of focus damage. Those are the 2 kinds of damage. Thrain's Guard, very cool ability. If you notice, there's a weird thing where this one gives speed, this one gives might, and this one gives focus. Kind of a little all over the place, but still good. The cool thing about Thrain's Guard is the first 6 instances of damage. They reduce allied dwarves, take less damage. Again, you see why he needs dwarves. Everything is focused around dwarves, pretty much, except for at least his special trees are. Durin's Blood and Musician are both not, but these are his special trees. They're unique to him. No one else yet has these trees. Maybe in the future someone will. Damage dealt is increased, affected by the might stat. So again, if you have Durin's Blood, that'll help your Thrain's Guard. So maybe you do want him to do damage too. He does pretty decent damage. He's not amazing. I'm going to rate the commanders here in a moment too. We're almost done. We're going to get to the main ones now. Defensive stance. He's got some things to help guard his army no matter who they are. Again, you're going to want them to be dwarves though, because you have to use Thrain's Guard. And again, this is respect 5. He's decent respect 1. He's fine at taking tiles if you have dwarves already. I don't think he is as good as the tier 3 I'm about to tell you about though, okay? If you want to be a role playing with dwarves, we are now going to talk about we should talk about Gimli real quick first. But what we're going to do, we're going to come back to Gimli at the end here because he's my main character. I want to talk about him most. So let's jump to the tier 3s real quick. Let's talk about Dain and Thorin. And Dain I'm going to save till after because he is similar to Gimli in a way, and I'll explain why in a moment. Thorin, again, has the revitalized tree we already talked about, right? Thorin is one of the best out of all the dwarves tile takers, okay? In fact, he is one of the best tile takers in the game, in my opinion, from everything I've seen, okay? Really good tile takers are characters that keep your units alive and keep the enemy units stunned when you're taking the tiles. So you can wipe a tile with very little, with 1 or 2 hits, and very little casualties. That's the goal, right, of this game early on. You really don't want to lose units. I keep saying that over and over. Yes, Zollin, I know I told him. So Revitalize, Zollin is my little dwarven brother, but don't ignore that. Revitalize is a super, super good ability, and Frightened, here it is. Frightened, when it's all the way up, I think it's 55%, or is it a little higher? But it's really powerful. So what you can do early, if you have very little points, is you drop 2 in Ironshield. He does damage. Again, you want him to damage. He gives all his units, by the way, this is all allied army, not dwarves, so you could use any kind of unit with him. with this particular ability. Stackable defense until the end of combat, okay? So this is, he basically keeps buffing his troops, which is super cool, and he gets might, which is great. And then he has an ability called Topple. This does physical damage and has a 50% chance on all levels of it to stun for 1 round against that one enemy every 2 rounds, okay? Super good because you're keeping people stunned. He also has Deliberate Strike, which is the very, very high physical damage ability that stacks way up to like 700% at max level. It's crazy. He does a lot of damage himself. So Thorin is a character that I highly recommend. He is good at all ranks. So if you just got him rank 1, he's still decent in PvP. He'll come out even with a lot of fights. But he's still, I recommend, he's really good at taking tiles early on. Revitalize, again, you already know how it works. And then Frightened, and then of course he still has Inspiration, which is affected by Focus, and increases again the damage of your troops. So he's very good. He buffs him, he does damage himself, he buffs his troops, he defends his troops with defensive things and healing, right? And more damage, and he stuns the enemies with this ability and this ability. You see why his tier 1 is so good? He'll take a tile and I'll lose almost nothing. It's like using Gandalf the Grey. He's just amazing at taking tiles, okay? So amazing. So now let's say you get him to respect 3 or 5, okay? King Under the Mountain, fantastic, right? Does lots of damage. It's super good. It's another stacking buff for your dwarves. So one enemy, you deal a certain amount of damage and increase allied dwarves. So this one is, you have to have dwarves. You can't just have any unit. So again, his early tree that's good at taking tiles could be any kind of units. Again, that's why he's really good at whatever group you're in, he can buff them. Now later, you're gonna want dwarves with him. And then his HP of his dwarves at max get increased, and he gets a stacking buff again. Works like Ironshield, they stack, right? He also has Longbeard. This is something that increases his damage. Remember King Under the Mountain, because DAIN is going to have this too. And Dwarven Gift, which means the first 4 instances of damage, first 4 instances of skill damage in each combat. For the commander, it says for the commander, see right there? Which means, don't get confused, that's any ability that does damage. So Ironshield does damage, we know that Topple does a damage, Deliberate Strike does physical damage, Revitalize does a damage, right? So Those are all 4 of those do damage. So if you have 1 point in this, and so does the King Under the Mountain, you need to realize what rounds they trigger on by going through the rounds. I have a video on that if you want to look at that. But I will have a more in-depth Thorin video too on the channel here soon. It might already be on here. Dwarven Gift is good for that if you want to make him the damage dealer, okay? Again, I highly recommend, he's better at buffing his troops. But he also does massive damage himself, even if you are focusing on buffing his troops. Longbeard, his physical damage ignores their defenses, okay? So again, lots of damage. All right, let's say you have respect 5. King of Durin's Folk, it's amazing, right? 1%, so it's 15% reduction of damage for all your dwarves. And then all your dwarves get +2 attack. That's an insane buff, all right? It's crazy. Just take my word for it. That's a lot. +2 attack for all your army is really good if they're all dwarves. Melee units, when hit by enemy normal attacks, well prepared. Just a little extra thing. I would rarely ever use this unless you're really just focusing on buffing your troops. Maybe you have some kind of melee frontline like depth defenders and you want them to do counterattacks because that would kind of synergize well with their abilities, but we're not going to talk about depth defenders right now. And then parry, right? Damage the melee units by 2%. So again, very powerful in those ways, very good. He's a good commander. He's a overall really good commander. He's very good in PvP. I spec him more towards doing physical damage, where maybe I wouldn't use Revitalize very much. And this Revitalize tree, and I would use, if I was rank 5 and doing PvP, I'd probably focus more on Ironshield, King Under the Mountain, and Durin's Folk tree. If you're taking tiles, those first 2 trees, fantastic. Maybe if you have extra points later, throw points in either Durin's Folk or King Under the Mountain for your troops, right? You're just focusing on taking tiles. All right, so now let's quickly jump to our other tier 3, which is DAIN. By the way, one little side note that's really important. This item with Shroud early for taking tiles is very good. Later, you're going to want different items. You may want the helmet that gives you mana immunity for your tile taking. And you also, for PvP, you're really going to want to be trying to find this item for fire reduction. Mainly for people using Alchemist and countering the Witch King. And remember, Thorin and DAIN do not have what DWALIN Ori has with Warrior with this fire reduction for their army. So I recommend getting that armor to be competitive if you can find that fire armor, okay? All right, so DAIN DAIN is a very powerful commander. DAIN is one of the highest damage dealing commanders in the game. That side of, you know, Lurtz and GIMLI, right? Now, I actually prefer GIMLI. I put more work into GIMLI, and I will explain why in a moment. But DAIN is an amazing commander, and if you have the resources to put the armor on him, he's amazing. So he has Ironfoot. Ironfoot, again, is a great ability. He does a bunch of damage, and there's a chance he stuns for 1 round. He gets speed, which is cool. Heavy Wound. Everyone knows how Heavy Wound works. Vengeance. He does a bunch of damage. Prepare 5. Each round deals, so he waits until round 5, and then each round he deals a bunch of damage. So by the end of the fight, he's kind of kicking butt, all right? Lord of the Iron Hills, he really needs dwarves. So you don't have to use dwarves with him. So if you really didn't have dwarves to use with him, you could go Ironfoot and Durin's Blood, right? Just make him a big damage dealer with his units. But if you're going to be using dwarves and you want to be more of a leader, this is a really good ability. Lord of the Iron Hills, your melee units' normal attacks do a bunch more, 2% times 15 when you put the points in, and affects all units, dwarf units. So you can affect your axe throwers and anyone, not just your melees, once you max this out, okay? He's also got Fortify. While defending, your units take less damage. That's cool if you're defending a location. You could trait into that. I don't rarely use that because it's kind of very situational, so that's up to you. And then Dwarven Leader, like BALIN had, remember? It's just a really good buff for your dwarves. So again, Lord of the Iron Hills, very good at buffing. Durin's Blood, you're really going to want to focus on him as a damage dealer. And then remember I told you Thorin had the same one as him? Well, King Under the Mountain, here it is. 2 HP for all your dwarves. Again, the damage one that stacks, and Longbeard and Dwarven Gift, right? Grit, excuse me, not Gift, Grit. The one that increases the damage. So you need to look what abilities trigger first. Ironfoot triggers on round 2. This one triggers on round 1. Whirlwind triggers on round 2. You kind of can go through and look. Heavy Wound triggers on round 3. All In triggers on round 3. Okay, all right. So anyway, it's very good. You can kind of decide how you want to build him and test your most damage. Again, we do have a video on him already on the channel if you want to check it out with a really deep dive, but we're not going to go more than that. But he is a very, very powerful commander. And his item is quite cool as well. Let's see, can I show you his item? There it is. It's actually a helmet, which is kind of interesting. Now, it is very powerful. This commander's physical damage increases, well, your highest, you know, your whatever your front line takes damage for the rest of the fight. It's very good, and it gives army defense, but it does take up your helmet slot. And there's some really good helmets like Madness Immunity and and Stun and a couple other things that you might want instead of this one. So preferably, it's not my favorite item out of the dwarves, all right? And then, by the way, here's Thorin's sword. We can even look at it. Thorin damage dealt 50% against orcs and urukai units, so which is really good. Again, if you're on a roleplay server where you know you're gonna be fighting orcs and urukai more as a dwarf good side, this would be a really good weapon. Allied army damage received when fighting orcs. So again, counter orcs with Orc Crest. Oh, I wonder why, right? The legendary sword. So again, +2 attack, might. Very good. It's still very powerful, very powerful. But again, those are both tier 3 commanders. It's very hard to get that gold mithril. It's really a lot easier to get the blue for low levels or the purple, which is why, personally, I went with GIMLI. So let's finish up the video with GIMLI, okay? GIMLI is an amazing commander. We have to first talk about his special weapon. His special weapon is actually Balin's axe, which, if you didn't notice in the movies, he doesn't have in Moria, and when he goes to his tomb, it's sitting next to Balin's tomb, and then he has it for the rest of the series. I don't know if you noticed that in the movie. That's a movie thing that's not from the books, but I thought that was a cool little thing that they did, what Peter Jackson did with the movies. This is why he's so amazing. Mine is almost maxed. This is all my work has been going to this guy for the last 8 seasons. I've been playing the game. And Pursuit ignores the target's evasion chances. GIMLI is just one of the best units for defeating people that have high dodge abilities and healing abilities, okay? So he just, I mean, Gandalf the Grey, a lot of people that use these characters a lot to hold spots or PvP, Gandalf the Grey, Radagast, and a bunch of the other more defensive characters, Arwen, GIMLI shreds them. I mean, it's not even fair, okay? He is a really hard counter, especially if you have your special weapon. Now, of course, you have to be rank 10. You have to have your purple mithril to even get it. So that's more But still, even besides the special weapon, now let's go into his abilities and see how good his abilities are, okay? So early in the game, he's actually decent at tile taking. He's not as good as Thorin. Thorin is the king of tile taking early in the game and end game, I've noticed. He's the one that doesn't lose troops. But you can go into Lockbear, which is very good, and it gives you 2 allies, 30% chance of recovering 50 HP damage is sustained, which is great. It is, HP is recovered, it does, it's modified by focus. So when you have it maxed, which is cool. If you put focus on him, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Again, I have it set up like this right now because I want as little damage as losses as possible when he's taking tiles early in the game right now. Friendly relations. So elves and dwarves take less damage. Cool. And he also has protect elves. If you put 1 point in this and you have dwarven guardians or some dwarf unit in the front, enemies will prioritize the dwarf over your elves. All right. So the damage from the enemy's normal attacks on behalf of the other unit. So it's really, really cool. So you can protect your bow knights or your archers, sentinels, or whatever you have, right? Very, very powerful ability. Just if you put 2 points in Lockbear and 1 point in that, that's great. You're already good. But again, for taking tiles, I like to use full Lockbearer, and then I like to use full Lord of the Glittering Caves. That's because your allied units, damage against melee units, you do more damage. And when it's max, your melee units take 5% less damage. It's a nice just flat buffs. It's a really good ability. Of course, you do have to be rank 5 for that. So if you're rank 1 with Gimli, you do not have rank 3 and 5, I would recommend probably not using them as your tile taker early. Keep to Gandalf the Grey, right? If you're a newer player, or someone that's a little bit more efficient, and then once you get a level 130, tile 150, you can start mock battling later Gimli to make him your PvP guy, right? If that's what your goal is. Again, experienced warrior is in the game. Fantastic. Hunt down, I didn't explain this with DWALIN, right? But DWALIN has this too, and so does the other person. Basically, this one is modified by might stat instead of focus. Remember, might and focus, right? Physical damage. So it's very powerful because it will start stacking a lot. And since Gimli has pursuit, he doesn't miss with his weapon because I have the special weapon, okay? Which again is purple mithril. It's tier 2, right? Mithril. And collaboration. Normal attacks cause an additional, it adds more damage, right? Again, really, really nice. And then his normal attacks. So this tree is very efficient at just doing a lot of damage with his autos. Durin's Blood. Again, very powerful. Okay, just like all the rest. And Lord of the Glittering Caves has break defenses and heavy wound in it. So Gimli has many abilities. Whirlwind, break defenses, heavy wound, all in. Hunt Downs is a stacking ability. Collaboration, this one buffs his auto attacks. Collaboration, I think, counts as a hit ability. I don't remember. I checked it once in the thing off the top of my head right now, but it's not really super important. But something you do need to know, guys. Again, I have a whole video fully in-depth reviewing him if you'd like to go watch that video. Durin's all-in is very, very good, but you need to make sure you put the last point in all-in. And you're like, what does that even mean, Zollin? Let me show you. So when you're putting your points in, and I have a video about this already, but make sure, all right, I'm going to put points like this just so I can open up all the trees. Make sure your last point of your active skills, okay, active skills are Whirlwind, all right, break defense, heavy wound, all in. All right, this is a passive ability. And I believe this is a passive, I believe. You go watch my other video. It'll have the details for you in that. But what you do is make sure you put at least 1 point into everything else. It doesn't matter how you do it, all right? And make sure you do all that. And then I'm just gonna, the middle ones don't matter, right? I'm talking about the active abilities. These are passive things. These passively increased stuff. You can do whatever you want, and then once you're done having the points in the active abilities, then drop a point in this. And now I can max this out. I could go all the way to 7 with this and leave all the rest at 2. The reason for that is it actually changes when the order is. So if you look at all these abilities, they all have different rounds they land on. Round 3, round 2, round 1. This one's round 3 as well, okay? It'll make sure that all end happens at the end. That's why you put it in the first point of it in last. Does that make sense? The first point you put in last, it means you're activating that it's a skill he will use. Okay, the first point you put in last before you put the first point in. But after you put the first point in all the other active skills. That's because heavy wound will now trigger before all end, and the reason for that is all end gives a self reduction for that round of reducing your damage. So you want all in to be the last thing you use in that round, because there's 10 rounds in a fight, right? Because you don't want other things to go off after it. They'll get 50% reduced damage when it's maxed. All right. So a little side note. I know that's a really random thing. If you're a new player, you're gonna be like, I didn't know that's a thing. I didn't know that was a thing either until me and Jethros did tests and we figured it out back in the day. So again, yeah. So that's really up to you. But to remember that, a little tidbit of information, but very important. Anyway, guys, we did it. We have covered the dwarves. I think that's all I wanted to cover in this video. I will have more detailed videos on each dwarf. I already do. I know on Gimli and DAIN. You can go watch those videos if you'd like. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful day in Middle-earth. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully it helps you. Don't forget to like and subscribe if I did earn it. Thank you to my patrons for the support. Thanks, Skumley, for being a Royal Guard. Subscribe button's there, guys, if I earned it. Yeah. Me and Zollin will appreciate it greatly. Next episode is my name is Zollin Ironshield, as always. Next episode's up there for RiseToWar, and over there is a Lotra Tale, my main content with voiceovers. Have a great day at Middle-earth. Baruch Hazad, Kuzad, I menu. See you guys.